Welcome to the Press Play and Run podcast, the podcast where everyday runners support each other unless you steal the local legend on Strava. I'm delighted to have you with me for episode 11, where I'm going to be talking about one of my favourite things, parkrun, with a man who knows quite a lot about it. I'll be joined by Pat Smith, who's the North and South Lanarkshire Parkrun Ambassador and has racked up over 300 parkruns on his own. But before that, I've got a fair bit to get through. As always, I like to begin with a recap of my own running, and this week I had a significant milestone on my Edinburgh Marathon training plan, where I knocked out my first 20 miler, including a parkrun sandwich at Strathclyde Park. Aside from one little emergency bathroom stop, which might have been because I couldn't get myself out of bed and ate too close to running, I actually went pretty smoothly. So I found with these long runs that the struggle for me was definitely in and around the ones that were between 14 and 16 miles on the plan at that stage. I've definitely got that conditioning happening in the legs now, and as long as the pace is sensible, I'm managing to get through them, and that mental bit is not quite as difficult as I was finding it in the beginning. So it set me up nicely. I have the Monklands Half Marathon on Sunday. Can't wait to meet a few people from the podcast community there and some familiar faces. And following that, I've got one more long run where I think I'm going to try and extend the 20 miler to a 22, and before I start to work my way back down towards taper for Edinburgh. All things being equal, I feel in good shape. I'm thankfully staying injury free, not because of my strength and conditioning, probably more through luck. But I'm feeling pretty good about Edinburgh. I was very, very inspired watching the London Marathon, as I'm sure a lot of you were, on Sunday. I was watching from the comfort of the couch as people staggered over the line, and you could see pretty much the whole gambit of emotions in the runners there, from people that were maybe not getting quite the goals they wanted to achieve through to the people that you could just see were living out a dream scenario coming over that line. So many inspiring stories as well from runners in terms of the charities and the adversity that's overcome. But I just want to congratulate everybody that finished that race. It's a magnificent achievement. It's a huge distance, and I think having spoken to a few that finished, all it's done is give me even more respect of the distance, because no matter what you put into the training, what happens on race day is pretty much out with your control. You can only put in the best prep you can and run the best that you're capable of on the day. Well done in particular to our former podcast guests. There was some magnificent running out there. And speaking of that, I'm going to be joined in the next episode by Alison Jardine, who we've had on a couple of times. She was episode 1 guest, and we had her on for a brief conversation before she went to Tokyo. So I want to get Alison back on next week and have a bit of a longer conversation in and around that Tokyo experience, her gaining her 6-star finisher medal, and the perspective of running the London Marathon, starting in the championship pen. So it was a huge day for her, and I think it'll be really interesting. She's got a lot to say about it. We've had a little chat, and rather than doing her usual race recap on Instagram, she's going to come on. As she always says, you learn something new in every marathon, and she's kind enough to come on and share what she learned in this one with us. We're also going to be joined in that episode by another special guest who I won't name at the moment, that's going to give us a perspective of 3 different marathons this year. So that'll be Brighton, Manchester and London, but a bit of a different perspective again on London. So more will be revealed on that in the run up to episode 12. As part of that episode, I really want to find a way to hear the voices of our podcast community that have been involved in the Manchester and the London marathons. There's so many unique stories. Obviously, I can only get through 1 or 2 on any given episode, but there are literally hundreds of you out there inspiring, overcoming things, completing your own journey, and I really want to take the chance to hear your voice. So what I'm looking to do is to set up a mechanism where you can record a voice note up to 1 minute and send it to us, and we're going to create a collage of people's marathon experience. So that could be something that you'll never forget from the marathon. It could be something about the people that you met that made it special. It could be the moment you knew that you were going to make it. It could be your most difficult moment on the day. It could be what you learned about yourself, or even just why you press play and run marathons even after just having been through that distance. So there will be more details on how to get involved in that in our social handles on Instagram and on our new Facebook page, which you can like or follow, or however Facebook works. So please look out for that. If we get enough of a response, we will definitely make that a feature of the next episode. Speaking of our community, you may also have seen through the week that I announced the first ever Press Play and Run community meetup, which is going to take place in Glasgow on June the 18th. So that will coincide with the men's and the women's 10k races in Glasgow, both on the same day, on the same route, just at different times. We are going to create a cheer squad of non-runners because I know that there's obviously the Edinburgh Marathon before it. We are also going to offer the opportunity for anyone running the race to meet up afterwards, and we're going to grab a bite to eat, a few drinks in a venue to be decided, where we can put names to faces of this brilliant community and just get to know each other a bit better in a very relaxed environment. So I would encourage anybody that can make it along. If you want to bring your family, if you want to be part of the cheer squad, you're more than welcome. If you want to come for part of it, maybe not all of it, again, that's absolutely fine. It's a very relaxed day. It's completely free to attend, unless you're running, of course, in which you'll have to sign up for the race. But what I would ask is that if you plan to attend at all, if you could please sign up using the Eventbrite link that is in the bio of our Instagram or Facebook page, because that will give me a sense of numbers to secure a venue, but also to keep in touch with anyone signing up about finalised arrangements without me having to spam the social profiles for people that are not in attendance. So I hope this will be the first of many. I'm really looking forward to it, and I've assembled a crack squad of helpers, which I almost instantly regretted after setting up a WhatsApp group. I never knew I had 4 project managers out of the group of 5 people, so you can imagine how smooth that's going to operate when everybody thinks they're in charge. But I'm delighted, I'm very grateful for their help, and I know it's going to be a great day. Please take part, please get involved. It will only be what the community makes it. It's not for me, it's for all of us. That probably leads me on to the final thing I want to talk about here, just very briefly, and that's the plans moving forward for the podcast. As I said, we're in episode 11 today. I've got a joint podcast in the offing with the Point 99 boys, with the 2 Steves, to discuss the Edinburgh Marathon, where Mr. Steve Runs announced last week that he is also going to be running, so that'll be brilliant to meet him. I'm going to have Alison and a special guest on, as I said, for a marathon recap episode next. Following that, I've only got another couple of episodes in the offing, centred in and around Edinburgh, which I will be running myself, and speaking to some other people that are involved in that event. Bit of a recap, and then we're going to take a short break at the beginning of the summer for a couple of weeks, revamp things a little bit, figure out what we've learned about this, figure out the parts that are working well, maybe hopefully reach out to the audience and get a wee bit of a sense of the bits that have landed particularly well, what you'd like to hear more of, maybe look for some new ideas to keep things fresh and to move into a series 2. Seems ridiculous to be saying that at this stage, but that will be in and around 15 episodes. It feels like a nice point to break and just take stock of where we're at. There are so many opportunities coming up and things that I'm delighted to be sharing with the community. So I just want to make sure that we keep doing things well, make this the best thing it possibly can be, and that we can keep that sense of the vision of what the podcast was always for and is always going to be for, which is for everyday runners in the community, and it doesn't segue into becoming something else by accident. So thank you again for all the support. This many episodes in, the podcast is continuing to grow at a steady rate. It's all the more worthwhile when we know it's having that appeal and it's reaching out and it's helping other runners to connect with some of the emotions and the things and the thoughts and the feelings that they go through on their runs. So that's enough rambling from me, for sure. I'm going to hand over now to my conversation with Pat Smith. Pat is an absolute salt of the earth, grade A member of the running community, the local running community. He is the everyday runner that we are all about. He is a constant presence in and around Parkrun in Lanarkshire. I've had the privilege of meeting him several times. I help volunteer sometimes with him at the junior Parkrun, and I hope that this episode brings a little bit of insight into those who do Parkrun and to what goes into creating it, or maybe gives you a bit of information if you've never taken that step before and you're interested about how you can get involved and why you should get involved. Enjoy the episode. Good luck with your running. Make sure you get plenty of rest if you are doing your marathon, and when the time is right, get out there, press play and run. Joining me in episode 11 is a local hero, fresh off completing his first marathon in Manchester. In his role as Parkrun Ambassador for Lanarkshire, he's been responsible for more barcode scans than Tesco and dedicates endless time and weekends to growing Parkrun and spreading the benefits of free running and fitness in his local community. I'm delighted to welcome to Press Play and Run Patrick Smith, who from this moment forward will just be Pat. Welcome, Pat. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, buddy. I'm good. Thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
Delighted to have you on. This one feels like it's been a long time coming. You were one of the first people who was recommended to get on, but I wanted to know what I was doing first before I got royalty on, you know.
Oh, well, I was wondering how long it took you, mate. I thought I was at the bottom of the list.
I'm not quite scraped the bottom of the barrel yet. That'll be Laurie. That's Pat's wife, who's the run director at Junior Parkrun, where my sons go. So Laurie hits me every time I'm there because of my cheek. So I may as well get in early with some of those jibes.
Well, good luck with that one, buddy.
So far, Pat, on Series 1, I've had somebody joining me from Tokyo. I've had somebody joining me in France and the even more exotic Aberdeen. But you're continuing our international streak on your post-marathon celebration tour. Tell us where you're at.
I'm in Seedy, Turkey on holiday.
Pat panned his camera around just to show me what the weather looked outside. Needless to say, I did not do the same for him to show him what Glasgow looks like right now.
Pretty miserable, mate. I think it's at a steady 23, 24.
I can see with your sunburnt coupon that you're just doing just a bit fine. You look a bit different from me. So I'm delighted to have you on, Pat. You're obviously somebody I've known on the periphery for a lot longer than I've known to speak to through your involvement with Parkrun. But before we get to anything to do with Parkrun, I want to start off on things I don't know the answers to, and that's finding out a bit about your own running, where it started, how long ago it started, and that it's a sort of potted history. Has there been anything in between?
Yeah. I was thinking about it when we spoke we were going to go on the podcast, and there was no definitive moment about when I started running, because I was looking back on pictures, Facebook posts, and I was like, when did I start? So I'm estimating about when, just as I hit my 40s, which probably is your typical midlife crisis, maybe a wee bit overweight, not really into the gym much. So I started running, and the obvious ones was the Glasgow 10Ks, which was, I'd done a couple of them before I even entered into the parkrun scene. And it was really just out myself, doing my thing. I got my brothers involved as well. So when we done the Glasgow 10Ks, it was more of a family affair. There's about 5 or 6 of us doing it, which was quite a good time. And then just continued on the periphery of running. There was nothing special, no major events. 10Ks was about my limit. And then going on holiday, I'd met this lad who sat next to me, and he was a member of Parkrun.
Okay.
And that's where my Parkrun story starts from there. But as for my own personal running, I've never really went big on it. I've sort of just hit it in the background. It's always good fun hitting it in the background, because then there's no pressure attached to it, which I feel as if I'm quite good at levelling out the pressure.
Yeah.
I don't really feel it, and I don't really give myself any pressure.
Yeah.
So when I'm out running, it's more of a relaxed affair, more of a take it as you see it, as you feel it.
You're like the epitome of the everyday runner that I suppose we're shooting this at, and that it's never been the central driving part of your life, but it's become an important one, absolutely. So was there no running early in your background, even from being like young? Is that basically a standing start at 40 and then you just start getting out there?
Yeah, standing start, really. Nothing really exercise-wise, but I suppose it's like most people. You've got an active life, you've got an active job, so that keeps you semi-fit. And it's just when you're probably hitting the 40 years that realisation kicks in that maybe that tyre round your belly shouldn't really be there.
Yeah, I think that's probably been the wee kick up my bum to get going again.
And I think it was Laurie that maybe noticed it first.
She's not shy, I'll give her that.
To be fair, she's always encouraged me all the way around, But I'm thinking that was a catalyst to it, and it was just a wee change. And, see, when you start running and you're out there, it clears your head. You've got a wee bit of mind space yourself to think things through, which I enjoyed,
Yeah.
But 99% it was running myself.
Which is ironic given what you now do, where your running's very much wrapped up in relationships.
Yeah, which is another good avenue. I've probably experienced both sides of the coin, which gives me a wee bit of understanding about people's journey and what they're going through and what the tipping points are, because entering into any sort of social engagement with running is quite daunting. Running's quite daunting. And then you've got the other spin-offs that are daunting that comes with it, i.e. going to a new club, running with people a wee bit faster, a wee bit slower than you. So, I've got a good understanding about where it all fits together, hopefully.
Yeah, and there's a risk reward to putting yourself out there, because if you've been running yourself, that is daunting enough to begin with. Then you're sort of exposed, feeling like maybe I don't belong there. But what you can get back in the flip side of it is so much more back from your running when you take that plunge.
Rewards have been immense,
Yeah.
I mean, personally, probably my well-being is probably a lot better now. I'm more rounded, not as in just my shape, but probably more rounded as a person, which I've seen me growing quite a bit over probably the last 10 years.
Can't believe you beat me to that joke about growing there. It's too early in the day for me. I would usually have been first off the mark with that joke, Pat. So something did change very recently then from that kind of running journey, 10k being the sort of limit. I know you've done much more since then, but if we fast forward then, what are we 10 years in? I don't want to ask a gentleman his age, but you've just done the Manchester Marathon.
Yeah.
So how big a challenge was that for you? Talk me through a wee bit of how that came about, preparation.
Through your running journey, when you're in the social circles, marathons tend to be a big topic of conversation. It's always an aim, a goal for everyone. And, I've never felt the pull towards it. I've never felt the need. I've done a couple of halves, more of a sort of tester. I've supported quite a few people on their half, which I tend to get more enjoyment out of, supporting them through their journey. And the tipping point for the marathon was one of our friends, he was doing his last marathon. He's got an injury and Manchester was supposed to be his last. And it always says, I'll do your last marathon with you as a support mechanism. The way it panned out, his injury was a wee bit worse than he'd expected. So I ran it myself.
Can't beat that. Somebody signing up with you. It happened to me at Manchester the year it was cancelled, and I'd done all my training. I was going to be running with my mate, and he pulled out as well. So I did all the training myself. It was devastating because I wasn't even that interested. Like you, I had never felt the pull until then of doing it. And now, obviously, I'm overcoming that. But can you tell me about how you found the training then? Because it is a big jump. You and I spoke about it at Junior Parkrun, just in terms of time commitment. How did you cope with that increased load?
I was very much adamant that I wasn't wanting it to interrupt my lifestyle. I wasn't wanting to take away any family time with my grandkids and my lorry, because I know it can impact. I mean, you must notice it yourself, the hours that you need to put into these things. And I'm relatively sort of fit-ish, I think. So I know you had to do a couple of necessaries, i.e. the long runs had to get increased in distance, and you had to do some speed sessions. So I sort of worked it out within my social structure just now that I will do my long sessions probably on a Sunday or a Wednesday, and my speed sessions were parkrun. So it's a bit different training program I had than probably most people's, because I was probably 3 times a week.
There is definitely more than one way to go about setting up. I mean, there's a conventional. If you speak to seasoned marathon runners, they will tell you the way it should be done because they've done loads. But everybody's goals are different in and within a marathon. It's not everybody's running to, try and get Boston qualifying time. For some people, it's a completely different journey. But I have noticed it myself, and I'm seeing the progress in my personal running, and that's so satisfying. But I do feel the selfishness of how frequently I'm out the house. I'm up to 80k weeks at the moment, 75, 80k, and it feels like all you're doing is running or recovering, and that takes a toll certainly on Nicola and the kids, and because you're eating into their time. So it's not something I think I could do on a very regular basis, but I'm throwing myself into it because it's the first time.
Yeah, well, you've got to be comfortable with your training plan. I mean, mine was always how my body feels. I've had problems with my knees for a few years, and I'm thinking, well, if I do 5-6 runs a week, my knees are just going to give way. So I wouldn't be able to achieve what I'm looking to achieve. A couple of times a week is sort of what I'm used to and what I think my knees can cope. So I was sort of balancing it up. You were quite right about the expectation that comes with marathons, because people always run for pace and time, whereas I'd sort of believed at the time just running it for fun, see how I go. I know a lot of people, once they do an event, their first thing is, I could have cut a corner there, I could have cut some time off there, I could have maybe pushed by that water station, and all these things go through your mind. Whereas I was just running around enjoying it.
I'm trying to keep as level about that as I can. I definitely do run to pace. I definitely have goals in my mind, but the first goal is to go and enjoy it, not hate it. So that if I ever want to do a marathon again, I don't have a negative experience of it. And so if that takes me 4 hours to get that experience, that's what it will take. And if it takes me 3.5, that's what I'll do. I'll do whatever I can within that safe limit of not blowing up.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite surprising when you do a marathon. It's my first one. The amount of people that you talk to en route, the amount of people with injuries that you see en route, it's quite heartfelt that people have worked so hard to get to a position and a place, and yet it just sort of crumbles in front of them. And, some of the people I was talking to, it was, they were very emotional because they put in the hourage and done the work, and suddenly it sort of caved in on them.
Yeah.
But, in it all, I'd say it's a very positive marathon experience I had. To be honest, I think it was a lot easier than I thought it would be. I know everybody will be like, yeah, right.
Everybody's hating you right now.
But, I expected, and that's why we booked the holiday straight after.
Yeah.
But I was quite happy how I felt after it and the day after. And we've been here a week now, and I think that's my third run I've done this morning. So I'm feeling okay. It's quite a positive experience for me.
Showing off, Pat, showing off. We spent the day on the couch yesterday watching the London Marathon. You're right, you just see the highs and the lows, what people have put themselves through to get there, and some people are on the line hanging by a thread. So people falling over the line, and then there's others that just had the best day of their life. The experience is completely different for everybody, but I'm delighted to hear you had a really positive one, and I hope mine feels something like that. Let's then move on. Well, we're jumping back in time because you mentioned Pollock Parkrun. So Pat is an ambassador. You're the Lanarkshire ambassador for Parkrun, is that right? I don't want to mistitle you.
It's north and south Lanarkshire ambassador.
North and south. Okay, so north and south Lanarkshire, and I live on the periphery of both of those, and I'm from North Lanarkshire originally. So we're from the same neck of the woods, and we run the same types of events. But can you take me back then to Pollock? How far back are you going into your Parkrun journey? You briefly mentioned how you started. Just tell me a wee bit about how you grew into that scene.
So the lad that I spoke to was quite enthusiastic about it. When people are talking to you about free events, you're always very sceptical about how big, how well organised. This sounds a bit alien. What do you mean it's free? So I had quite a lengthy conversation with him during the flight, and it intrigued me. So as soon as we came back, 2 weeks later, I'd then ventured to Pollock. And what a surprise. Firstly, the amount of people that were there, I think there was 300 there, which I'd only seen that at big events previously. And I had money in my pocket just in case there was a donation to give, there was something to give back. I had money with me. But no, not unless I skipped it, nobody asked me. But apart from it being quite crowded and narrow paths, it was quite enjoyable. And when I spoke to Laurie after it, I says to her, yeah, enjoyed that. Just a bit narrow paths and a bit busy. So then I sort of teetered on I wonder if there's any more. And that's when my local one, Strathclyde, came on my radar. And I'd been running around Strathclyde a few times, so I knew the path network. And I was like, well, that's a wee bit wider. I looked online and I saw the numbers were a wee bit lower. So I thought, maybe that suit me a wee bit better, because it's all about how comfortable you are in that environment. And sometimes when you go to Parkrun for the first time, it's very intimidating. I mean, I don't underestimate the challenge people are facing when they first visit a Parkrun, because Parkrun is very community-based. So you're walking into a community-based event that you're not a part of yet.
Yeah.
So it's quite intimidating that you're there. Everybody else is talking. Everybody knows each other. And it's probably the same as any running social event. You're alien to that at the beginning. So I persevered with it. As you do, you just start talking to people.
As you do.
You just go over and you have a wee chat. Because I was very curious about how the whole thing worked. More so because it's free. I'm like, how can you do that?
Yeah.
How does that work?
And when was this for you? How far back, just to put a timeline on that, for Strathclyde, like first run Strathclyde?
12 years.
Right, okay, I didn't even realise it'd been going as long as that.
Yeah, you're probably still at school at that time, weren't you?
I think I was 2. No, I jest. I definitely wasn't running that long ago, though.
So that was in probably July, August, when I did at Strathclyde. And the event had just started in the April. So I missed the beginning of it for the first month or two. And the first time I was there, I was hooked. Welcoming, similar to the Parkrun today. Welcoming, encouraging, people there supporting you. It's a fabulous environment.
I mean, I know you've listened to a couple of these episodes, and I am a huge advocate of Parkrun. Not involved in any way in the sense that you are in any official capacity, but it's been the glue to my running, regardless of what I've been doing in running. So whether I did a bit of triathlon for a while, Parkrun was still the run I look forward to every week. I based a run around it. Marathon, now I'm sort of Parkrun sandwich, and I'll run to a Parkrun, do a Parkrun, come back. I love the social bit, but I think it took me genuinely 60 odd Parkruns to top 10 of the maybe 50. Ooh. I don't think I'd spoke to anybody until that point, unless I went with them. I was just turning up, doing my run and going home. And then I started opening up a wee bit, having more of those conversations. And that completely changed my experience of what Parkrun is. It's moved from being somewhere where I ran as fast as I could to something I look forward to for the people.
It's a very intimidating just when you initially go there. But as a core team member of any event, we always advocate that you go out and you try and speak to as many people as you can, being a core team member, because that's how you invite people into the circle. Whether it's a small circle or a big circle, but it lets them get involved and it lets them know who you are. It lets them see a familiar face, because when you're going to any meetings or any event, first thing you look for, who do I recognise?
Yeah.
Where's my safe zone?
Yeah.
And that's how you're attracted to this safe zone. So when you go to a park run, people are looking for a safe zone. Previously, when I first started, I always done first timers briefing. Always gave people my name, let them know I'm always there for you. Come and speak to me, just so that they've got a point of contact, someone that they know. Their name is Pat. He might be a bit gobby sometimes, but he's a familiar face, and he always has a wee chat with me. And that, see, for some people, that's the turning point. That could be the turning point from turning up to an event or not.
Of course, yeah. We had Emancipated Run Crew on, a run crew in down south in London, and they're at South Norwood Park Run. And I was asking them the question because we were having a chat about diversity, and they don't see a lot of black and brown runners at park runs, even in such a diverse area as London. That bit sticks with me. Jules was saying, just open your circle up, literally. Like, she means if you're standing in a crowd, open it out, say hi to people passing, look for the person on their own, try and reach out, because it can absolutely be the thing that makes a person come back next week. And I think Parkrun ethos is that, and it has to be that.
Yeah. Now, when you go to any park run, you can stand up on maybe an elevated area and you'll see silos. You'll see small groups of people all around having their wee circles, and none of them really intermix. For a RD, for an ambassador, our goal is to get as many people involved in volunteering in the event as possible.
Yeah.
So as us, we advocate breaking down these circles. And the only way you break down these circles is going over and having a wee chat, introduce them to your part of the park run experience. And that's one of the important things that we do at Strathclyde, because the core team are always out chatting rather than sticking round a circle themselves. They're always around promoting the event, speaking to different people, getting their experiences, cheering them on, and that's what brings people into your circle. And the bigger circle you've got in an event, the easier volunteers are to come by.
Yeah. But the converse is true, I think, from a runner's perspective. If you're feeling a bit about going and a wee bit anxious about stepping over the line, going to a smaller park run, I think, is very often an easier way in. Strathclyde, in my time running it, I think I'm at about 80 odd park runs, and I've done most of them there. I've seen the growth and the numbers. It's gone from sometimes 150 at the start when I was there to you can have 300 in any given week now. So that can feel impenetrable for how do you actually break into that type circle. Whereas if you're at Tollcross, if you're at Candlerig or somewhere else in Lanarkshire, you're going to have a much reduced number, and it can be a wee bit less about having to speak to people. It gets a bit easier to put names to faces, I think.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about. It's just seeing the familiar people week in, week out, because that's what you go for. You go for your run, and you go for some social activity. Now, that might be the only social activity that person has all week.
Yeah.
Social interaction. There might not be anything they do.
Yeah.
And we promoted it for the last few years now. We used to focus on runners, increasing the volume of events. But now, over the last, probably 4 or 5 years, it's been more about the volunteering, the well-being side of it, and getting people involved in the social activity that is parkrun.
Yeah.
Rather than everybody's there for a nice run and getting a PB, which is great when you get it. But when you stand back and you look at people's stories and journeys, it's not all about the running side of it. We've got a lot of volunteers who don't run.
Yeah.
They're quite happy just volunteering, and the wee bit of social inclusion, speaking to people, cheering people on. It's quite amazing. It's quite heartfelt. It's like going to the juniors. I mean, I defy anybody to say they don't enjoy a juniors when you see the kids running through the line.
I mean, my boys are completely converted to it.
Well done for them for their PBs the other week.
I think they only get PBs when you and I are not there.
Oh, well, probably, mate.
I had them there. I was there on Sunday watching, and the two of them were sauntering around. I'm like, they're just trying to wind me up. They'll just run as slow as they can when I'm there, and running as fast as they can when it's their mum now.
No, they've got the ideal story, mate. They'll just PB when they want. It's not an occasion. They're there to enjoy it. I seen them a few weeks ago. I seen them when I think I was Tail Walker, and they were round picking flowers. I'm like, well done, lads. Good on you. Just enjoy it. And that's what it's about. It's not about running fast all the time.
I was marshalling that week, wondering where the two of them were until Joshua came round the corner waving a daffodil. I thought, there you go. Sometimes you just can't train the runner, and someday they've got to find it themselves.
Something to aim for in your marathon.
He gave it to his mum and told her that he picked it for her, so he's got the right idea of keeping mum sweet at least.
Nice one. Now, hopefully I'll see your picture at the end of Edinburgh Marathon with a daffodil.
Aye, well, I'll probably be lying like one in the muck. Let's take the chance while we're here then, just because it's a natural segue then. Volunteers are obviously the lifeblood of Parkrun. Without it, it doesn't happen. You hear the RDs say it. How important is it, and how much of a struggle, I suppose I want both sides of this, how much of a struggle can it be for some events to get enough to put that on?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been a struggle. And you think when an event has mass numbers, you don't think it's a struggle. But, as people have got other things in their lives, they've got other commitments. There might be the only opportunity that week of getting a run.
Yeah.
So why do they want to volunteer when they need that run in for their own mental health needs, their own fitness, But it's always a struggle. It gets better the more you open up the circle. There's a couple of things that we tend to do, i.e. just try to open up the silos. So saying when you go to an event, you see the circle of people, you try to break down the circle, you try to introduce yourself, and you get them understanding that it's a face behind a volunteer rather than just a role that someone does and they walks away. And, that's a constant struggle for every event. But, it's down to the community to support each individual event. The event is community-based. It's not a guarantee that event is going to be on every week.
Yeah.
And it's just down to the support of the community that event is on every week.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing more than that. It's not down to my doing or any of the core team. It's down to the people stepping forward and having that sort of responsibility to say, well, I'm giving something back. The enjoyment that you get out of giving something back sometimes eclipses the running that you do, especially if your running is like mine and your PB world is over.
Never.
But that sort of introducing a new side to Parkrun on the volunteer side is really important, but it is a perpetual struggle.
Yeah, and I've obviously been doing it a lot more through the juniors, which works for me because I can get my Saturday running and also give something back on the Sunday. My kids are at it, but I've even volunteered a couple of weeks when they've not been running because it takes up less time because it's only 2 kilometres. But you get a real sense there of what goes into a park run to put one on. I've seen a couple of good social media posts recently from run directors basically doing little stories of here's what it takes to put on an event and all the kit laid out the night before, rocking up in the morning, walking the course and everything that goes on. It's a big undertaking. So I suppose I would just join you in saying to people, I understand not wanting to give up a run, but there are points when we are all niggly, injured, running a different day, some people hungover, whatever it is, take the chance that day if you can to give it back. You don't have to do it often, but you get a whole lot back, especially at the juniors. You get high-fived off a million wee people on the way by, and you're making their day. They're having a brilliant time. So I would say to MD, it's been a hugely positive part of my own parkrun experience. And I've got to know you guys, the core team, who I then see at parkruns all over the place. And again, it just improves my social experience of the event. So to anybody toying with it, even if you're wondering what parkrun's about, go volunteer first, get a feel for it before you stand on that line and feel nervous about running.
Yeah, good shout, mate. Good shout. We'd advocate that all the time. Give it a go. That's all you can do. If you're feeling intimidated, marshal. Out on one of the marshal points, like see everybody pass them, see the smiley faces, see the whinging faces, see the complaining faces, see the disappointed faces,
see the 15-minute faces as they blur past you.
Very true. They're always fast. But when you see the kids, when you're marshalling up at the kids events, I mean, the kids just go through a myriad of emotions within that. Okay, they go everything. Every one of the kids get a stitch. We supply stitches free now.
Yeah. You're just trying to stop them getting in the lock for a swim half the time.
If the kids have got a stitch, just usher them on, give them a well done, you're doing fantastic, keep them going. So that experience itself, the interaction with someone is for your well-being and for your own mental health is quite encouraging.
Yeah. And actually planting that seed, Pat, for kids about the benefits of running. I've had Joshua and Brodie on like for a couple of minutes in a couple of different episodes, and I don't prime Josh on what he's saying, and he talks already. They're hearing, they speak a different language in school than we spoke about well-being and anxiety and speaking out, and so they've got a much deeper understanding. But he already knows the benefits of how much better he feels after he runs than being stuck at a screen. You're planting real important seeds, getting young people involved. So that's something I wanted to ask you a wee bit about. Part of the drive of the podcast is definitely turning towards that sort of social justice element and widening access to running. And I think something I've noticed, and I think I spoke to you about it, Pat, maybe, is you are in Drumpeller Parkrun for the juniors, and I know I look at the one at Elder Park in Govan as well. you're in areas of really built up deprivation, right? So that's just statistically what it is. I work in North Lanarkshire in education. I'm well aware of the statistics. The population of people still coming to Parkrun doesn't always represent the area that it's in. How do you take steps as Parkrun in terms of reaching out with partners to try and encourage everybody to understand the benefits and to be able to access?
Yeah. It's a hard journey. I think initially, I've always believed that running is a middle class activity. Initially, I always believed that. And the good thing with Parkrun is it breaks that barrier down from your natural journey would be going out running yourself, join a running club, get serious, try and improve your stats, time, pace, distance. Whereas Parkrun sort of bridges that wee gap. It's like a cushion. So you go out running yourself, you don't really want the commitment of a running club, or maybe financially it's not available for you. You join Parkrun and you do it for free. So it's that small introduction. But when you're talking about the social deprivation of areas, I mean, it's a fine line. You want the community to support the event. You don't want to overly publicise that you're needing people to come.
Yeah.
Because it's supposed to be more of a want to do it rather than I think I need to do it for the community. If that makes sense. So you try and get the message out about what you offer. Now, touching base with local schools, communities, is always a fine line about how you do that. There's that many organisations out there looking for participants and people to join and everybody, just like I was back in the day, everybody's always that sceptical about free events.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my goodness, what's it going to be? And then when you look at the environment it's running, it's Compeller Park, it might not be accessible for people because they don't have a car. They don't have any access to get there. There's a lot of challenges ahead, but Parkrun as an organisation are definitely stepping up their understanding about the local communities, what makes everyone tick. And with local communities, it's not as easy as one size fits all, because communities are different, the dynamics different, the diversity is different. So what you would do in one middle class area, you wouldn't do in maybe a socially deprived area because it wouldn't hit. So they're very much, recently in the last couple of years, they've put a lot of focus on it, and they're still doing it as we go along. So every ambassadors conference that we go to, there's definitely certain tips and tricks, and our toolkit is getting expanded as we go along. But it's an Elder Park. I mean, my heart goes out to Elder Park.
Yeah.
You know the location. I know a lot of people maybe don't know the locations in Glasgow, but you're in between Brook and Glen. Fantastic park.
Yeah.
100 plus kids every week. You're in between that and Victoria Park. Probably 70, 100 kids every week.
Yeah.
Elder Park in the middle. If they get double figures, they're doing well.
Yeah, and but for anybody who doesn't understand the geography of those areas, it is probably one of the most working class areas in Scotland, right on the banks of the Clyde, and it's a very built up area, so transport not necessarily the same barrier that it might be in Lanarkshire, where it's a bit more rural than that, not overly, but you still need a car really to get to Drumpeller from most outlying areas. And then you've got Victoria Park and Rook and Glen Park that both sit in, again, quite middle class at least areas in some of that. And this is something that I see in my job. It's not just running, that applies to opportunity elsewhere. So maybe you're right, maybe it's just you can't browbeat people into going. That's not what Parkrun is. But if people are armed with the information of how they can and why they can, then there's something there. So maybe there is still a role. I know I'm certainly speaking to the people that I work with in active schools and whatnot. There's a lot of people, as you say, whose job it is to promote events, and it's just getting that message out there. Can I ask you, Pat, what Parkrun then has done? I think you've probably touched on it, but what does Parkrun mean to you at this juncture, 10, 12 years down the line as an ambassador?
It probably has a lot of different avenues that sort of ticks my box. You obviously like the notoriety, people knowing who you are, which is great. Like before, when marathons weren't my thing, the support element, I was more interested in supporting people doing their half marathons than I was doing one myself. So similar, if you transfer that over to Parkrun, you're more interested in supporting people rather than doing it yourself. And see the enjoyment that you get from someone popping up and doing their first run, maybe coming up running and maybe their brother's trainers, their brother's shorts, and suddenly you see them week on week improving, getting better, maybe improving their time, suddenly getting involved in the volunteers. And you see them growing, just the same as the kids that you see them growing. You see them getting a bit more confident, a bit more cocky the kids are, because they tend to be a wee bit more forward than the adults are, a wee bit more cheekier, which is great because they come they're very shy. I mean, it's like you two, you're like, oh my goodness, here they come. Here's a little one. that for me is probably where I feel benefits me more. Probably it's quite obvious. It gives me the feel good factor, as if I'm contributing to the community, as if I'm giving something back and helping people through their mental health journey, their fitness journey, whatever journey they're going through. If Parkrun can help, then I'm definitely there to facilitate that as best I can.
That's essential though, Pat, for anybody volunteering. It's not all selfless. You need to get something back from it, or you wouldn't do it. That's how we're pre-programmed to work. If you're going to give your time, you get something back. So I completely understand that. You're now anchored into your own community through running, and you've got so many positive relationships. And I see that with you. I mean, you would talk to the wall anyway, but nearly everybody who's running. The wall would probably stop listening, but you would keep talking. I've seen a few holding me up before back in the day. What about the growth of running in Lanarkshire then? So what's that been over your time? So when did the ambassadorship start actually first, and how has it grown in Lanarkshire since?
Well, ambassadors have always been with Parkrun. They've just grew the numbers for the volume of events that we have. They don't want the ambassadors to have too many events because it loses grit, not control, but it loses involvement, because you want to make sure you're still there to support the existing events as well as the new events. So you having too many sort of spread you too thin. But with an area like North and South Lanarkshire, there is certain areas as an ambassador you'll look at and you'll think, I think we need a wee area there, or I think we need a wee event there, and you sort of pinpoint ones. So when I first initially started in North and South Lanarkshire, I think we had Lanarkmore just started, we had Strathclyde, that was about what we had. So since then, Drumpeller started, Drumpeller 2K, Alice has started as well. And I'd earmarked Cumbernauld because Cumbernauld is a very community-based running area, and so is East Kilbride, Straven, Wishaw as well. So they're probably my next sort of targets to try and push for an event. And what that does is it spreads the love a bit. I know that's probably quite hippie-ish saying that, but a lot of people are on the periphery of an event like Strathclyde who probably in the back of their mind they want to get involved, but they're not really confident enough to push forward by the sort of the lines that you need to go by to get to the people who make the decisions. Whereas if they had a local event, smaller event, they might feel a wee bit more able to put forward and to take some responsibility on. So definitely the two areas are on my key for this year.
You put out, or actually through the Parkrun account, it went out an information session if you want to hear a bit more, if you're looking for. So what can people do to get involved if they think there's somewhere there, I'd like to get involved, if they've been a part of the Parkrun community and think I could start one? How do they take those first steps?
Okay, so what they do is they will give us an email in or speak to one of the ambassadors or the local event teams, and they will then point in direction on who can help. We will then send them some information on the technicalities of the processes that you need to go through, to the hoops that you need to jump for an event to go ahead. And with that, you'll get an ambassador who'll walk with you side by side from start right all the way to the end, and even further and past. So you will always someone there to sort of steer you in the right directions, give you guidance on what Parkrun sort of processes are, what the event has to look like, how safe the event has to be, and you will have that side-by-side experience all the way through. But even before that, if someone is interested in getting involved in Parkrun, I mean, speak to your local event team, get involved at the volunteer level initially, seeing what the background is like, to see initially, it's a great idea, or I want my own event, but you need to have an involvement, an understanding about what involvement is, so be a volunteer, shadow an RD, be there just in the background and see what goes on, and then you make the decision of whether you want to do it or not. It's not, sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming, but it's like anything in life. The first time that or the anticipation of doing something the first time is always worse than the continuation of doing it.
That's what I was thinking though as well. A lot of people would look and say, I know a place, but I think it's important that you do have the experience of even seeing what a run director does, or having the experience of having done it yourself.
Yeah, there is a lot of safeguarding involved as well, because you're responsible when you are an RD or an ED for the safeguarding of that event and all its participants. So there's a sense of responsibility to it, and some people take that like a duck to water. Some people are a wee bit intimidated by that, but it's good to have an understanding before you venture into that. What the expectations are.
I love Parkrun. I've said that a million times on here. I just would encourage anybody, if you've never been involved, go get involved. Whether it's volunteering, running, it will open up a new avenue to your running. It doesn't need to be, if running is something you like to do isolated on your own, fair enough. But if it's something you struggle to keep the motivation with, it can really, really help to know that everybody feels like that when they run at certain points. And that's where you're going to meet other runners.
Yeah. The feeling that you have in running isn't isolated. Everybody has the same niggles, twinges, doubts.
Yeah. I know that you run with Mount Vernon runners as well, which is a social Jog Scotland group. Now running is not such an isolated thing for you as it was in the beginning.
Ben's group, and I'm not really an advocate, just me personally, I've never been in a running group, like a running association. I've always felt that's maybe not my bag. So when I heard about Ben, what Ben was doing, I was like, that's fantastic. Similar to the sort of Parkrun ethos, it's just a social group. No coaching, no seriousness about it, no targets to reach or given or expected. You just turn up, have a wee social run, have a wee laugh, and then you go home, which is, for me, that fits my bracket. And that's why because around our area there's a couple of great clubs. Newton Road Runners is fantastic. I couldn't promote them enough if you're wanting to take that next step up. But for me, Mount Vernon sort of hits the box just now.
We're blessed. We're absolutely blessed with some really good running clubs, as you said. And you've got Shettleston and Rutherglen. And depending on your level of competitiveness and seriousness, there's a club that fits everybody. But for loads of people, a club is not the step they want to take. And I can understand that. But Ben's doing incredible work in terms of, for me, providing a community space and a safe space for people that don't maybe want to run on their own. And he's there all year round. He's such an unassuming guy. I couldn't speak highly enough of him. Was delighted to see his success in London there as well on PB.
And fantastic.
I'm just going to tell everybody though, he was greeting after it, just so you know. He was. I sent him a wee message and he admitted it, so I'm going to out him publicly.
Nice one, mate.
So Pat, with your own personal running then, Manchester's been, the marathon is ticked off the list. What is next? I know it sounds like you're not driven by one race to the next goals. That's not what your running is. But is there anything else that you're looking in the horizon that ticking off?
Not really. There is. I mean, when I do these big events, the halves and the marathons, it's always in support of someone. If someone is looking for that wee bit of encouragement or that wee bit of company, either during their training or during the event, I'm always open to that. But for me personally, I've nothing. I don't look forward and plan my year's running events. I like doing a couple of events. I enjoy doing them. Me and Laurie do the Paisley 10K, which is quite enjoyable. The Glasgow 10K, over the last couple of years, we've took holidays over that time, so we missed that. Last year we done the Black Rock 5, which is an amazing event. I'd never experienced anything like that. You're starting off in Kinghaven, running downhill onto the beach, running around the Black Rock, and I didn't appreciate when people were telling me your feet are going to get wet. Well, the other side of the Black Rock, you're knee deep in water as you're going round and you're running back, which is an amazing event. I mean, I think there's about 1,200, 1,500 people there, which is amazing.
More than just your feet getting wet there.
Oh, it's unbelievable. They've got a piper on the rock. I couldn't promote that one enough. That was a great wee event.
That's amazing.
And I like the idea of doing something different, like the Forth Road Bridge one. I think it's got to be something different rather than, not that there's anything wrong with running around the streets of Glasgow, Lanarkshire, Edinburgh, anywhere. But I think it needs to be something scenic and spectacular for me to sort of do an event now.
Yeah. We are going to have our first podcast meetup with people, with listeners, after the men's and women's 10K on the 18th of June in Glasgow. So I'm looking forward to that one as well. I don't think I've ever done the men's 10K. Nicola's done the women's and she's doing it again. So we're going to make a day of it a couple of weeks after my own marathon. So I'm looking forward to that as well. Whether I'm running or cheering, I've signed up, but I'll see how my legs feel nearer the time.
You'll be fine, buddy. You've done the leg work.
It feels like I've done about 3 people's leg work. I think actually this week, Pat, I'm going to run more by the end of this week than I ran the whole of last year, mileage. So that just shows you the volume that sort of ramps up for marathon.
Yeah, that's incredible. You're doing well, mate. I watch your Strava all the time. You're doing fantastic, mate.
I love to self-promote, that. I'll tell everybody how amazing I am. I'll hide the bad ones from you though.
Well, I've noticed the missing segments of his track.
Aye, exactly. That's when I was in a car like that ultra runner.
That's amazing, eh?
That was unbelievable. I'm not going to get drawn too far into that world.
Let's not go into that.
Right, Pat, I want to round us off with you. Again, you've listened, so you're aware. There's a quick fire round here.
Sure.
One of these questions is going to be more painful for you than for most, but I'm going to hold you to an answer for each of them. So it's the sort of first thing that come to mind. If you want to explain a wee bit about it, you can do, but we'll move through these at a wee pace. Favourite running shoe of all time?
Parkrun used to, back in the day, they used to give you free trainers every month, or a person who improved the most. That was a good days. So Sweatshop used to promote a free pair of trainers for every event for one runner. And I'd lucky enough that I got it. But previously that, it was always £20, £30 trainers. So Gavin, the lad who's in Sweatshop, got me on the treadmill, worked out my gait, as they do, gave me the technical side of life with my legs, and gave me this, I think it was £150 trainers, which I was very grateful for. Tried them on, thought, fantastic, I feel great, I'm going to break all sorts of records. The first 3 months, I think I had 3 runs. I was just injury after injury after injury, because it was changing my gait, changing the way I run. And after 3 months, I'm embarrassed to say, I shoved them in the bin. So as for favourite trainers, I don't really have any. I try them on. If they're nice and light and they're comfy, I tend to buy them. Make, I'm not really associated with any sort of particular make or style. It's just really if they feel comfortable and they're light, that'll do me.
Well, I'll just edit that out and write in Crocs, right? So we'll say that.
Thanks, mate.
Favourite training route?
It's got to be the one from our house. It's the route from our house up to Big Bargedi, and I've always had it in my mind. There's a 10k route that I've always wanted to do, a relaxing 10k under 50 minutes. And every time I go out, I'm 51 minutes, 52 minutes, and I've just never broke the back of that yet, and that's probably my favourite one. Yeah, I was so happy that I got, where we are in CD, I got the local legend on my Strava, so just like to put that out there.
Oh, well, that's good. My long run next week's going to be running up and down there until you've not got it anymore.
Thank you.
If you're going to sun yourself in holiday, you can expect to lose that. Best running related book or podcast you've read or listened to?
Okay, so I'm not really in the social media zone. Tinker on Facebook, but podcast, yours is the first podcast I've ever listened to on a regular basis.
So we win by default?
No, certainly not. No, it's a voluntary thing with your podcast. I don't think I have to listen to it.
Yeah, you absolutely do.
Yeah, I do religiously listen to it, and it's enjoyable. And it's probably because there's a lot of connections, and I'm familiar with a lot of the discussions that you're having.
Yeah.
The good thing is that the guests that you're on are familiar as well.
I usually ban people from saying this podcast, but because that is the first one you listen to and the one you do listen to regularly, I'm keeping it in. Proudest running moment?
It's probably got to be the marathon there. For one reason, that I was never interested in it. For two, this isn't blowing my own trumpet, I thought it was a lot easier than I thought it would be.
What about worst race or running experience?
Okay, so Mark, my son-in-law, was reintroduced himself back into running, so I was doing a lot of training with him, and the target was the Glasgow Half Marathon. So said I'd support him all the way through it. He was getting a wee bit faster than probably what I was comfortable with, but on the event day, he was positive, he was looking good, he was feeling good. I'd just come off the back of the flu, wasn't the best. I'll get the excuses out of the way first, right?
Sounds a lot like it.
Sorry about that, apologies for my excuses. So started off fantastic, 5k minutes, started off quite comfortable. He was strong, he was looking good. Reached Bella Houston, Pollock Park, for the turnaround, and at that point I was done. My feet started bleeding, my knees started giving way, there was just nothing in the tank. So, as any honourable thing, told me to push on, stick to his pace, commit, and keep doing what he's doing. And he got a fantastic time. For me, by the time I got to the finish, it was horrendous.
What about ultimate post-long run meal or drink? What did you go for it right after the marathon?
Well, on the night before, we went to an Indians, which was fantastic. Maybe advisable to have an Indian the night before. It was fantastic. So when we'd finished, the Indian was around the corner, and I thought, I better not have an Indian just in case it doesn't agree with me. So I went for pasta. So nothing in particular, just pasta, something nice and simple. And we'd made the mistake that we had to leave that night.
Yeah.
Because our flight was the next day. So it was a quick meal.
Run with or without music?
when I started running, I always ran with music. At Parkrun, don't run with music. When I started training for the marathon, ran with music. When I done the event, never ran with music. So it's very much with the training, yes. On the events, no.
What's the best ever single piece of running advice you have been given or could give?
I remember a few years ago that I was watching one of I think it was the European Championships or the Olympics, and one of our Scottish athletes had wrote on her hand, "Go out strong and commit." I can't remember who it was. So she had it written on her hand and the camera had caught it. And I thought about it and I'm like, my goodness, that's such a strong statement. Now, it's not about go out fast. It's not about kill the time. It's about just go out strong and commit to what you're aiming for.
Yeah.
Whether it's to finish the event, fast, slow, distance, whatever. But go out strong and commit.
I like that. That's good. Now, the question I feel borderline bad for asking, but I'm going to anyway. Favourite park run? It's like asking you to choose between your children.
No. Probably for regularity, Strathclyde is probably my favourite. But I have, when I'm going round, when we're visiting other events, or if I'm doing a wee bit of tourism, the event has to have water next to it.
Yeah, a loch, some kind of loch.
A loch or the coast. The event has to have one of them. To be fair, I mean, I've ran quite a few different events. We used to do an event that a group of the core team at Strathclyde do, Parkathon, which was every year. We used to go to an area and smash out quite a few park runs. So you visited quite a lot of park runs. I think we've done 18 in one weekend. And to be fair, the parks sort of look similar unless there's something idyllic about them, i.e. a nice coastline, running over some dunes, or at Crosby, you're running on the sand next to the statues, which is fantastic. Crosby Beach is amazing.
There's a couple of good recommendations for people as well to go and try something off the beaten track, but Strathclyde takes the biscuits. Strathclyde is definitely winning this horse race here. Going to ask you a final question before the playlist track. So could you finish this sentence, please, Pat? I press play and run because...
I like to hear Ryan's voice.
Well, thankfully for you, there's plenty of wind to come out of these sails yet, so I'll be keeping you going, boring you to tears for a while longer. So final call of business as always, Pat. We've got a press play and run playlist on Spotify. So each week the guest picks a track, and the one that wouldn't come out their sort of running or exercise rotation over the years. So can I ask you what yours would be?
So I thought about that because I've heard the podcast before and I know this question's coming. So I don't have anything in particular through the years, but through my marathon training, the one song that sort of resonated a bit, and now it's on my Spotify, and I changed the words a wee bit, so it's probably a wee bit cringy, but it's the Pink song, I'm not going to give up my dancing shoes. And I always change the word dancing to running shoes. So next time you hear the song...
You mean the first time I hear the song?
Yeah. Well, have you not heard it before?
I'm not going to give up my dancing shoes? No, yes. I don't think so.
Yeah.
No, maybe I have when I actually listen, and I didn't know that's what it's called.
It's quite a cool tune. It's more of the Love Boat kind of tune.
Yeah. Well,
I'm my age.
I can safely say it's not one in my rotation, Pat. But I will. Yeah. Nothing could make this playlist any stranger than it already is. So let's just get it on there. Roll with it.
So, but you've got to change the word dancing to running.
Right, Pat. I'm going to let you get back to your holidays. I am delighted we got the chance to actually do this. We have spoken, obviously, for a few weeks about making this happen. And for you to give up time in your holiday, I think just shows you the type of grade A man that you are. You are a huge asset to Parkrun, and Parkrun is a huge asset to our running community. So thank you to you and all the core teams, I suppose, up and down the country and up and down the UK that put the work in to give us that space to run. I really appreciate it, and I know that so many other people do as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the time you've spent on us, buddy, and I appreciate the invite.
Top man, Pat. Brilliant. Thanks a million.
No worries. No, speak to you soon, mate.
Cheers. Thank you to you, the listeners, for joining us for another episode of the Press Play and Run podcast. You can really help to support the podcast by subscribing or following on your podcast platform of choice and by leaving a review. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Press Play and Run Podcast, and to add the Press Play and Run playlist on Spotify. We'll be back every 2 weeks with new episodes, and please be sure to keep an eye on our Instagram page to find out which guests will be joining us. Until then, keep getting the trainers on, press play and run.